ridiculous.
What I find so funny about Mac Jones especially is we talk about that draft all the time and how cursed it is. And I have the draft up here as well. Go through it quickly. Like that quarterback class with Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields. That draft is going down as one of the worst drafts for quarterbacks in NFL history.
Yeah.
So before we get into the NBA and we talk about that team as at large, I have this draft up in front of us. I'll go over the top 10 picks. I'll go through each of them. You can tell me whether they are busts, to be determined, or just flat out studs. So first overall was Trevor Lawrence.
TBD, to be honest. Honestly, with Trevor Lawrence, he was the best player in high school. He was the best player in college, and he was supposed to come into the NFL. He's the prince who's promised, and he had one of the most disappointing rookie years. He had the whole Urban Meyer situation. However, he did ruin the Indianapolis Colts season with Carson Wentz at the end of it, and then he had a nice, solid year, destroyed any faith in Justin Herbert in one playoff comeback, had the worst first half and the best second half he could possibly have. And that's kind of been the story with Trevor Lawrence. It's like, okay, wow, sometimes. And then other times you're like, you tripped over yourself and fumbled the ball when no one was around you. That's some Daniel Jones type of stuff going on right there. So it's like, sometimes he looks like Patrick Mahomes. Sometimes he looks like Daniel Jones. Can we at least get away from the Daniel Jones and at least be slightly better than Justin Herbert? That's all I ask.
Yeah, right now he's got 58 touchdowns, 39 picks on his career. So touchdown interception ratio, not quite to 2 yet. Number 2, Zach Wilson. I mean, bust, right?
Bust.
Massive bust.
Yeah, they literally asked, like, there are some executives, they're like, what would you give up for Zach Wilson? Or what do you think the trade value is for Zach Wilson? And they're like, I don't know. We'll give you a free stay at Marriott for Zach Wilson, or we'll put you up with Benzino and the Red Roof Inn.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Trey Lance at number 3. You could put him as due to be determined, but I don't see it either. He's played 8 games, 5 touchdowns, 3 picks. That's been his games.
Yeah, so I would say the situation with Trey Lance is kind of how you would have to evaluate that, because with him being the 3rd overall pick, with him being the guy to replace Jimmy Garoppolo, kind of the weird allure that he created in that locker room, the drama associated with it, and then a 6th round pick took his, or a 7th round pick took his job in Brock Purdy. I think it's a bust because he was the 3rd overall pick. Even if he was just taken in the 2nd round and you didn't give up, I don't know, 3 picks to receive him. I think they gave the Dolphins 3 first round picks for him.
They gave what turned out to be Jalen Waddle, Bradley Chubb, and Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Dolphins obviously won that trade.
Yeah, so you lost that trade, and then he's not on your team anymore. So I would say he's a bust just because of the context of that situation there.
Yeah, 100%. Now we have Kyle Pitts, number 4.
I mean, the guy who is supposed to be the next Calvin Johnson at tight end. I know Arthur Smith drafted him, and he doesn't really know how to use tight ends, but he was supposed to be the dude. He was supposed to be the guy. I should not see games where Jonnu Smith on your team outplays you. That cannot happen.
Yeah, no, I think he's to be determined, but he's edging towards at least a bust or at least a disappointment.
No, with tight ends and receivers, like the first few years, like this is not a guy, he can't block, first of all, and then he's a tight end who they really just need to put him at wide receiver. It's like, no, you're a bust. You're supposed to be the next Calvin Johnson. You're the 4th overall pick for a tight end, which is unheard of.
And you were also taking the pick before, Jamar Chase, who's you could say is the best wide receiver in the league, but you have to at least put him top 5.
Yeah, you have to at least put him top 5, and it's like, then this is where you get to if they're bust or not, because it's the context of where you were picked and who was picked after you. Imagine if the Atlanta Falcons had taken Jamar Chase. I don't want to, because I don't want to imagine Jamar Chase rotting away under a porous Arthur Smith system there, but Jamar Chase instantly went to Cincinnati, and then his rookie year, they go to the Super Bowl. And then the next year they go to the conference championship with him being one of the most dynamic receivers in the league. Mm-hmm. He's like if Tyreek Hill came into the league with better route running.
Yeah. And plus, if you look at the next couple of picks too, all of these guys are studs. The next pick being Jalen Waddle, who's a stud.
Better than Kyle Pitts.
He's a stud. Penei Sewell, who's one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL and has been great for the Lions.
Yeah, Atlanta could have used someone like Penei Sewell at number 4.
Number 8, the Carolina Teppers, J.C. Horn, who's a stud corner.
The Carolina Teppers. I mean, yeah, he's been a stud. I mean, all the defensive players in this draft were pretty good. It's really like Kyle Pitts, and then you have some quarterbacks, but like overall, like defensively, wide receivers, incredible draft.
Yeah, although ironically, the very next pick after J.C. Horn is Pat Surtain, who's better, I think.
Pat Surtain, it could depend on the system and just the coaching in Denver. I think J.C. Horn has been very good in Carolina, but like when you're getting up every day and David Tepper is your owner, David Tepper is throwing beers at people. The Carolina Panthers defense has been really good, but their offense has been straight up demoralizing. We had the Baker disaster. For some reason, they wanted a guy who could see ghosts in Sam Darnold, and it wasn't because of Kid Cudi and Kanye's mixtape. It was just him seeing actual ghosts.
Yeah. To round up the top 10, we have Devontae Smith as well. I think he's somebody who I don't think you can call a bust. I don't think you can put it to be determined, but I also don't think you could call him a draft hit either. He's been good for them.
Yeah.
I'll put him in I think he's a B category.
Who is drafted at receiver after him? Because I feel like there are better receivers in this draft than Devontae Smith.
We'll go through some of the wide receivers here. After him, later that draft, we have Justin Fields, who's about to be traded, Mac Jones, who just got traded for a bag of chips. But here are some of the wide receivers in this draft. I'll go through some of the notable ones. We mentioned Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith. The very next wide receiver after him was the infamous Kadarius Toney, who single-handedly left the Chiefs off of your top 5 each and every week.
Yeah, he did. And then they benched him, and I put him back on my top 5.
Yeah. So single-handedly carrying down the dynasty. Rashad Bateman was also in the first round.
Ugh.
He's been average. He's been fine. Elijah Moore, who's now a Brown, he's fine. Rondell Moore, don't even know what to call him, to be honest.
Fast.
Yeah, fast.
It's like when they were talking, it's like when the Nelk boys interviewed Trump. They're like, what do you think of OJ? He was like, golf. And that's like, what do you think of Rondell Moore? Fast.
We had Tutu Atwell in the second round. Josh Palmer, who Chargers fans are naive about. Let's see. Third round pick, Nico Collins.
Nico Collins, absolute dog. I mean, 6'4", built like a rock, absolute stud.
Yeah, he was the 89th overall.
We got Dougie Mills in this draft too.
We did. For wide receivers, the most notable one who fell later in the draft, none of these other guys really notable. Right ahead of him, 109 overall was Dez Fitzpatrick, who had 5 catches for 49 yards in his career. 3 picks later, the Detroit Lions selected USC legend Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah.
With the 112th pick overall.
Yeah, and honestly, like, he's better than basically everyone. Like, you have Jalen Waddle, and I think I would take Amon-Ra St. Brown at this point over Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle's a little bit more fragile. He's not as tough, and he's not going to get those gritty catches that Amon-Ra does. So I think, honestly, I would go Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, and then Devontae Smith if I'm ranking like the top 4 receivers in this draft. And then everyone else in the first round is kind of a miss for me. But like, as far as quarterbacks, this is one of the worst quarterbacks drafts I can remember. Like, this is not quite to the level of Jameis and Marcus Mariota yet, but after Trevor, it's like, okay, Mac Jones is traded. And then originally Bill Belichick wanted Davis Mills.
Yep. So this is I'll go through all the quarterbacks real quick. Zach Wilson, we already said was a bust. Trey Lance, we already said was a bust. Justin Fields, to be determined?
TBD.
Yeah, maybe he'll go somewhere else. He'll ball out. Mac Jones, I think his ceiling is like 15th overall quarterback. Like average.
I would say 20th.
Average at best. Kyle Trask. We didn't really see much of him. I think he's thrown 10 passes in his career. But
TBD.
He's a second overall pick. It doesn't really matter. Kellen Mond. He doesn't even play in the NFL anymore. He's gone. Dougie Mills. I mean,
he's okay.
He was in Houston where they didn't have all this talent around him. They had Nico Collins, but other than that, he didn't really have much help. So, I mean,
the Lovie Smith era. Like, what?
I think he's a good bridge quarterback.
I thought he was fine. Like, I thought he was like when Mike Glennon had like he had a few nice games there. I think like he's going to be like a Mike Glennon who he can go around, be a bridge quarterback for you. But I thought Dougie Mills is actually fine. And I think he'll be a good backup quarterback. But I think like if you're a team like the Jets or like Miami who needs a really solid backup quarterback, fancy Dougie Mills.
He's cheap.
He may be a solid backup and less expensive than Carson Wentz.
Yeah, and he was the 67th overall pick. Ian Book, who threw 12 passes and 3 of them were intercepted. And then the last quarterback in this draft was Sam Ellinger. 3 for 3.
Wait, what'd you say about Ian Book? He threw how many passes and 3 of them were intercepted? For who?
The Saints.
Saints?
He threw 20 passes and 3 of them were intercepted, meaning 1 in every 6.5 passes were intercepted. And then we also have Sam Ellinger, who was a part of that disastrous Frank Reich, Jeff Saturday weird Colts season where he had 3 passes, 3 for 3, and then he threw 100 passes total. Running backs, real quick, we had Najee, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams as the big 3. And then we also had, later in the draft, Ramondre Stevenson, Chuba Hubbard, Elijah Mitchell, Khalil Herbert in the later rounds.
Bust. I will give that running back class a C-. Honestly, Najee Harris is the biggest edge of any running back I have ever seen. I mean, he'll like grind absolutely. It's the most painful 20 fantasy points I have ever seen with Najee Harris. I'm like,
such an edge.
Why does it look so hard? And then he'll suck for the first half of the year. And then at the end of the season, he'll look like one of the best running backs in the league. And it's like, nope. Can't do it with Najee Harris. Javonte Williams, get a new pair of knees, and maybe I'll consider it. Ramondre Stevenson had 1 good year for the New England Patriots. Last year, he didn't remember he had legs until they played the Buffalo Bills. And then after that, he got hurt. So, I don't know. Is he a Derrick Henry? No. Is he a Josh Jacobs? No. Jonathan Taylor? No. Go down the list. Ramondre Stevenson. Maybe he's like 10 in a top 10 running backs.
All right. And then I agree. So then lastly, the only real thing to stand out for this draft is the defensive players. Notable players included J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, Greg Newsome. We also saw Asante Samuel Jr. in here. We also see, Damar Hamlin's in this draft as well. Edge rushers, we see, edge rushers suck too. Micah Parsons was in this draft. He was 13th overall. He panned out for them, obviously, at this point. Some defensive tackles, including Jonathan Marshall and Lee McNeil. Linebackers, Jeremiah Owasio-Carmoa, Nick Bolton, Pete Werner. So pretty decent defensive players in this draft. And then that's really, this draft, mostly the wins are on defense, and everybody else kind of not really panning out.
Yeah, it's a really top-heavy receiver draft, and then you have Amon-Ra at the back. Not a good running back draft. It's okay at best, C- for me. And then, defense, definitely the strongest point in this draft. Maybe one of the worst quarterback drafts in the league. What we'll do is next week, probably just compare it to that Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota draft, because that's a fascinating one. And I don't remember any, good quarterbacks being taken after them, so maybe that's the draft we'll visit next week. But let us know if you like the draft segment where we recap and roast, especially players throwing 20 passes and 3 of them being intercepted. But overall, it was a fine draft. Good defenders.
Interesting.
Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, a lot of Bama boys.